We can go ahead and get started.
You want to get started with this session?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted some IT people here.
And we can, all these sessions are flexible. We want this to be good for you. So if we need to dive into things that may not be relevant for the title of the session, we're happy to be super flexible. So let's talk a little bit about just Canvas in general, kind of the technology. We've grown fast over the last few years. So here we are here. This is a group, Phil Hill and Michael Feldstein do some data analysis every year about LMS technology. They put us in this open source section. Like I mentioned, we're really open core, and then you can download our software, run it on your own, but we're a SaaS company, software as a service, so that's the focus for us. Not only have we grown quickly, we've done a lot of implementations. We focus on being, again, all those key ideas, but we have the same attendees. We don't have to go too much into detail on that. But like I mentioned, over 2,400 institutions. We do, typically 800 to 900 per year, or so with 7,000 training hours. So we're very skilled in the area of implementation. And we don't have all the data for 2017, so this is 2016 data, and this pretty much continued on in 2017. We did about 77% of the implementations across higher ed, right? And so that's a lot. We've transitioned schools from all of the major platforms, Moodle, Blackboard, D2L, et cetera, and we do a majority of those implementations as well. So with that, again, as I mentioned, that uptime is based on hosting on Amazon Web Services. So they're really, really good at what they do, and we try to mimic that in terms of how we build as well. So we're running, you can always check again, status.instructure.com, where our SLA is 99.9%. But we're typically above that, usually 4 nines plus a couple digits here, 6, 7, 4, whatever it is for that 12-month runtime. Typically where we run, and we keep and track all that information online. We've got an admin net promoter score above 60 as well. That puts us in the realm of Netflix, Amazon, etc. A lot of the high quality tools out there in terms of usage. The implementation timeline, pretty quick for Canvas as well. As I mentioned with Dunwoody, they had planned for a year and we're done in 4 to 5 weeks. I'm working with a community college in Wisconsin right now who also planned for a year. And just based on their pilot information, before they even started their pilot, they've already moved their timeline up by 8 months. And that's just because it's a lot easier than it feels. I know that there's a certain fear there, right? In the beginning, migration is going to be tough, technical integration is going to be tough. Typically, it always was with enterprise software. It's just not anymore. We do a really good job of it. And as I showed you, we're very, very skilled in it. So we plan on about 12 weeks. You get a customer success team. So that's a customer success manager and an implementation consultant. The implementation consultant is really primary contact in the beginning of your contract. They're going to do all the work in terms of helping you set up authentication, which I believe is Azure and LDAP here. Is that correct?
Those are the people that ask that.
No, right now
it's just LDAP? Okay, yeah.
But that's the problem.
That's the problem. Okay, is that changing or?
Well, we're connected with that with a single sign-on. But Google doesn't work with it. Wilson's working with people, I guess.
Okay.
Well, our hope is whatever that LMS is going to be, that we're going to use Azure as the identity provider.
And I'm pretty sure we're good there, but I'll double check on that as well.
And we're using the Illusion Identity Services.
And that's been a part of our implementations as well. Yeah. So on the authentication side, that's good. Another question?
Just before you go further, you mentioned that you are on AWS, SaaS on AWS. How is the architecture of the layout of the service? How do you share server between all the users, or they all separate, or plugins and stuff?
So we're multi-tenant architecture in terms of the software core, right? So we have one software core that's updated. That's why we can update all of our clients at one time, through a Sunday night window or Saturday morning window, like 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. or so is when usually updates take place every 3 weeks. And I'm going to get to, I have a slide on updates. And they're all on shards, right? So we build shards of users throughout that setup. We can send you the full architectural document if you'd like. Even I can do that as soon as I finish presenting today, or just right now. I can send you that full architecture document for you, unless everybody wants to take a look at the fun architecture stuff. Yeah.
Can you be sure to repeat the questions for the audience?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the question was if we're hosted, what our structure to the architecture is, and can we see that? I'm going to send a document that'll outline as well as security. I can do that as well, so you can get a sense of that. Good. So we plan for about 12 weeks. We do it pretty quickly. That's implementation. We were also asked to kind of talk about support. We do support in 3 different ways. Basic support, standard basic, is included in Canvas. Typically, an institution of your size would not do this unless they have a very large internal support team that's highly skilled in Canvas. We typically don't see that. So you're probably going to do one of these 2. So 24/7 support is 24/7 for the admins. You get 3 admin accounts that have 24/7, 365 access by phone to our support team. All of our support team are Canvas employees. They are located mostly in Salt Lake City. We have a London office to handle our graveyard shift, but they're still all Instructure employees. We do not outsource support. We actually hire frequently from that team, a lot of times into that implementation consultant role I talked about. So they are technically motivated in a lot of sense. So up to 3 admins, although you can purchase additional admins. We have a ticketing system, you'll track tickets, all that good stuff, 24/7 phone access, 8-hour web form SLA for that tier. Or you can move up to 24/7 tier 1, which means your faculty and students can call our support team directly. Now the structure to that is that we would collaborate on a document together. So again, you'll reach out and you'll get in touch with our support team. The faculty and students will have a document that says, you know, your phone number. You get an individual phone number, so you're not calling into a common phone number. So we will know as soon as our phone rings that it's from Southeast. And we have a document that can help us manage your support. So for instance, if a student calls in with a registrar question, we'll make sure that that registrar question or registrar number is on that support doc. So we can say, hey, that's a registrar question, not a Canvas question. Here's where you'll go, right? So we'll manage that so that that's a really good process for your faculty and students. But this is kind of the overall contact we see. So 1-hour web form response, 1-minute phone response, 2-minute live chat response, and 1-hour email response. And that's for your faculty and students. So they're reaching out to us directly to handle your support cases. Those 3 admin accounts, those 2 options stack. Those 3 admin accounts will have access to track all this as well. So they'll know what the tickets are currently, what the SLAs are, what's going on, et cetera. That's all accessible to the admins. And then in terms of kind of some metrics that we have about a 91% 12-month SLA compliance, 98% of support resolved tickets, 80% on first contact. So we don't elevate very often past that tier 1 level. We don't get into tier 3, tier 4, which are usually computer software engineer level support. 94% ticket satisfaction. So a simple yes or no question at the end, were you satisfied with support? We're running about 94%. Again, we put a high metric here. We hire high quality individuals, usually promoted into the company further internally. So support's super important to us. So that's kind of the high level view of support. Any direct specific questions about support? Question?
There's so many times that you show this on the first slide. Does that acknowledge the issue or just stop working on the issue?
That's the, hi, this is Canvas. I see your issue, let's talk about it, right? And then we go into that 80% metric in terms of what was solved. So typically that contact, it might take a couple of days, but 80% of the time we're going to solve that at tier 1. But we'll get working on it right at that moment in time, right?
And that's the standard, is that our students and instructors can call directly for the issues?
No, that's called tier 1 support. That's the highest level of support. The standard support is still that admin level support where you guys provide tier 1. Again, most institutions your size don't do that level. It's going to be one of the other 2 levels.
Do you have the price information on that?
I do.
Okay.
I sense I've been pressed. Any other questions? Okay. The other piece to support is going to be the community. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we're one piece of software. Everyone is on that same piece of software. That means the customizations that someone is doing across the country, you guys can actually use. So for instance, University of Central Florida, you saw the accessibility checker earlier, but the University of Central Florida built an entire open source accessibility tool that's much more account and course focused, finding where all the accessibility problems in your course are. That's open source, accessible to our users. They built that, put that on top of Canvas. Our community is doing them all the time. It also helps with support in that these are all people active. Again, they're all on basically a LinkedIn type environment. We're all using the same system. So support is really strong and our community is awesome. So they're there to help, particularly the admin and developer communities, the 2 communities that this group would be interested in. They're very, very active in Canvas, doing lots of different things in terms of the authentication, the SIS, doing really unique custom SIS integrations that do things like Great Passback, and then building tools and helping each other. So the community is another part of support, and because we're on one system, it actually is a very, very useful one. And you can go there now, so if you have an account in the sandbox, you can actually validate into the community and ask some questions right now, and feel free to do that. They're really helpful. The other part of being in the cloud is those update releases. So we do a 3-week release cycle, so every 3 weeks we update Canvas. Now you do get 2 other instances with your production instance of Canvas. You're gonna get a test instance and a beta instance, okay? So test instance updates every single week, and that's where you're gonna test the things that you do specifically here. You can run some tests, only the admins have access to that instance, right? You guys can test tools, test SIS imports, test any changes you're doing all of the time, right? That just refreshes every Sunday or every Saturday night, every week. The beta instance will refresh every 3 weeks with our update cycle. That's where you go in and test the things before it hits your faculty, test the new features that are coming into Canvas. And you guys can play around and test with those as well.
It's actually reversed.
Oh, sorry, yeah, it is reversed.
Beta is refreshed every week for iterating on the product and doing the releases synchronously. So we might do patches and fixes as we hear back from the customers who are doing beta testing. And then test refreshes at the same schedule as prod. So test and beta will have a snapshot of your production instance, so it includes real courses and real user data, but they're not live, they don't send out notifications to users.
So for the data, do you get email or a particular thing that patched?
So
That's just that one. That's something.
So you won't get them for the incremental changes that happen during the beta cycle. You would want to watch the release notes, watch the commentary, because our developers and our community team leads will be in there. Like, so say with a beta release, you see that something is changing, and you go into your beta site and you say, yeah, that's not working in my beta site. And you post that on the community, and somebody else says, yeah, it's not working for me either. It goes back to the prod team, they'll look at it, and then somebody might come in and say, okay, we fixed it, try it again. Right? So a lot of that conversation, we're very transparent. We want this documented. We want Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we have beta release notes and production release notes. So you can see something hit beta release notes first, then at some point we'll move over to production release notes, depending on the timeline.
And it's public. You can go back right now and view our current beta release notes in the last few that we've run and get a sense of, you know, how many of these are faculty focused versus student focused versus admin focused, and we just redesigned the people and courses navigation. Like, so what you'll see today is happens today, and then when it hits prod in a couple of weeks, it's a little bit different.
And 3 weeks sounds fast. I said this in the chat as well. 3 weeks does sound fast, but you have to start thinking about updates differently. So with something like Moodle or your typical enterprise systems, you're updating a large piece of software every 6 months to 1 year, maybe a little bit longer. So you're getting a laundry list of changes, lots of interface changes, lots of new features, a massive list of items. We're doing incremental updates every 2 weeks, so that is much smaller, much more manageable. And we're very sensitive to the fact that changing even a button in the middle of the semester is a catastrophic event, right? So we're very conscious of that, and a lot of features that come in that could disrupt the experience are behind what we call a feature flag. And feature flag is automatically set to off when the feature is imported into Canvas, right? It's a new feature, it's automatically off. And you as an institution have a choice whether or not you want to either allow faculty to turn it on or off, because maybe it's something minor, or to turn it on for everyone, or just leave it off and test it on your own. So you have that flexibility. So for instance, with our new UI, we did that in 2015. We updated our UI. We had a flag on that for a year. So all of our institutions had up to a year to move to the new UI. Now, sometimes in that case, you want to do that faster than you might typically think with a new UI, because for instance, the new UI was much more accessible. It had a lot of screen responsive design, et cetera, to it. So it was probably important to turn it on pretty quickly. And it's in a beta, you know, it gets beta tested, it gets all the features in terms of software development with it. So it's there, and we had institutions turn it on day 1. We had some institutions obviously wait until day 365 to turn it on. So you have that option to really scale out those updates and turn them on at non-disruptive times between semesters, et cetera, right? So that's kind of how our release works. And again, please take a note of the kind of the size of our release notes. Go check it out in the community and see what goes on. I'm going to talk a little bit about product development, because that again was a request, and then we're going to move on to real specific admin features. So this is what we've done. These are kind of major features over the last 7 years. We focus on making sure that we're both communicating with our clients and thinking about it from a software perspective. So last year we had a pretty big year in terms of things like Blueprint courses, and we had an Alexa app as well. So that's a lot of fun. We plan Canvas this way. I mean, it's all wrapped around what we do. And actually, in terms of our user groups and our user community, about 40% of our feature updates come directly from that, and we call those out on our release notes. So if you go check out our release notes, you're going to see a little tag under certain features that says this was suggested by our community. 40% of our features have that tag. And that's huge, because we do interact. We want a lot of feedback from our community. Again, we're an open company, open source development, and we can do this very quickly. So this is kind of how we develop, and I'm going to pop up the current 18-month plan. I'm going to let you guys read this, and before we get into the admin features, if you want to see, I got some screenshots of a few of these. If you want to talk about one of these, just let me know. I'll let you guys read them. And if we don't want to dive into anything, that's okay. Anyone have any questions about anything? I want to see something in particular. We talked a lot about quizzes.next in the last session. It's right up there in that area. We're doing a refresh of analytics as well. Lots of fun stuff.
That's an existing app. It's just
First.
Oh yeah. It's just getting a little bit of a refresh, but it already exists.
We just got a refresh. It came out yesterday, actually. The mobile app, very much like it's Canvas Cloud, and our mobile apps are built completely off the API. So just like the desktop version, we do a lot of changes frequently. So there's just certain stuff we don't want to hold back. You know, why we for our semester break, just if it's a better tool, if it's a better experience.
I don't know, you might not relate to this, but we have a plan for Flash.
Yes. Yeah, we're working on it. So for those of you monitoring the industry, Flash is an older technology that it's got some flaws in it, and it doesn't work well. It's not the best technology for multimedia. So there's been an industry push across all sectors, not just educational software, across all sectors of technology to do with Flash as far as content creation as well as content delivery. Some browsers like Chrome don't even support Flash anymore, right? So we are working on replacing Flash with HTML5, which is the agreed upon industry standard for multimedia. Two browsers, Safari and Microsoft browser, do not fully support HTML5 yet. So we're kind of in that, we're pushing forward on HTML5 development. Our partners that integrate with Canvas, like Big Blue Button, are also pushing forward HTML5. I think the finishing piece and when we can finally pull the plug on Flash will come when it's supported by all browsers. Because we know that, especially in our K-12 schools, there's still a lot of schools that rely heavily on Microsoft. If Microsoft doesn't support it, you know, we're stuck with the same problem. So yes, we're developing on going forward with HTML5. We will be supporting HTML5. We have to support both right now.
In terms of browser support, we support the last two versions of all the major browsers. So Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the really fun stuff. Oh, another question.
One other question, and this is not really related to just about information. Mobile apps. You talked to your mobile app. What do you see many schools have their own mobile app, and now you're having an app for the apps? Do they end up using one or the other, or still using two?
So the question was, for schools who have another app, do schools use just our app or the two apps, et cetera, right? So a couple answers to that. So we do develop a mobile responsive browser, so students and teachers can log in, run their browser, on their tablet, on their phone. We make sure that that's an important and focused experience, and it's there. The apps exist so that we can take advantage of the power of those devices. Things like touch grading, right? So all the annotation features that Carrie showed, Speed Grader can be used by touch interface on the iPad. and that's powerful. As well as the webcam, the audio device, using the modern tools to interact. So that is the case in many of our students. I mean, students are used to downloading 70 apps on their phone and being able to quickly go between all of them, right? There's some good data out there from Northwestern that students are comfortable in Canvas in 30 minutes. I think it's 75 or 80% of students were comfortable in Canvas in under 30 minutes. The rest were under an hour, right? So students are used to that. From a student perspective, having multiple apps is probably not an issue. Faculty may be a little bit different. So we do have that teacher app that's very teacher focused, and it does exist. We do have some campuses who have turned off mobile access, and that's fine. That's certainly an institutional choice. We also have campuses who have built their own mobile app or integrated. As Terry mentioned, our apps are built completely on top of our APIs, so there's nothing stopping an institution from building something specific that makes sense to them through our APIs as well. So you kind of have that flexibility, but most institutions are going to use apps, and most users are pretty comfortable with even 2 or 3 apps for their institution. Okay. Any other questions? All right, so we'll jump into the fun stuff. Can I stop sharing?
You see my screen? All right. So we're going to talk about the admin side of things. In the last session, we did a lot of course level stuff and focused on the teacher and student experience. And we can certainly bounce back and forth if we need to or if needed. So people who are admins are your traditional LMS administrator, the formal people. They manage the LMS as their bread and butter. They do it every day. But an admin might also be a department chair, program director, a dean, the registrar, a librarian, a help desk technician. So we're going to talk about all the different types of roles and people and how to give those people permissions and access to what they need. Okay, so we don't have to hand over all the keys to all the cars in the garage, but you can give people autonomy throughout the system as needed. Okay, so you would have your root system level admins, and then you would have these secondary admins as needed, and you control that. You decide as a system how you want to do that, and you change and manage that going forward. There are some tools that only the system admins have access to, like CSS authentication in terms, right? Your program department chairs don't need that, right? So we'll divvy that up. So a couple of key things that we want to talk about. Let's first cover the authentication question, which came up earlier. So I did chat with my team back in Salt Lake. So the Azure integration is fine for SSO. The LDAP integration for authentication is fine, and however you want to manage that going forward is fine. We have schools big and small that are working that. The question was, do the users have to also authenticate with O365 when they're using it in Canvas, right? Or will the SSO cover that? So the answer is yes, they still have to, because what needs to happen, or what happens during that process is what we call an access token is generated. And it's that access token that's by user that lives in Canvas in order for the connection. So the user does have to. Another example of that is with the mobile app. When a user first launches a mobile app, the mobile app access token is also generated and is associated with their user profile. So the SSO is fine, but unfortunately the users will have to authenticate that one time to generate the access token. Does that make sense? So in your admin area, when you're an admin, you have this admin key and shield here on the left-hand side. Your teachers and students don't see that. Only if it's, you know, a department chair who's a faculty member that also has admin access, they can see it. So only designated admins have access to that shield, and that is how you access your root account. By default, the first thing you're going to see is your courses and your people tabs there. See all the tools, the admin tools on the left. Courses is your main landing page right now. If you read beta release notes, you'll see that that's changing in a couple of weeks. So your courses tab is the first one you see, and we'll come back to this in a minute. But it really is just an alphabetical sorted list of courses. And there's some tools on the right-hand side to sort and filter and find. So Professor Joe teaches math, and you see him walking down the hall, he's coming to talk to you. You can search for Professor Joe's math course or search for Professor Joe using those tools. All of these tools here, we're not going to cover all of them today. You're free to explore them as needed. Let's talk about authentication. So authentication is something you can control. You don't have to have us set that up for you, but during your implementation period, we'll give you as much support and training and resources as you need for this, for setting up your authentication. So there's some general documentation that's available in the community that talks high level about how authentication works, but we can provide you more specifics depending on whether you're LDAP or sample.
We do have pass-through authentication. So when they log into the portal, right anywhere else, that have to be authenticated.
Correct. Single sign-on, yes, that's applicable in Canvas. So I want to point out the resources if you have a laptop and you want to dig deeper into any of these topics. And you can actually Google Canvas admin guide and this will come up. We're ranked pretty high in search. Or you can go to community.canvaslms.com and look for the guides. So the admin guides, this is all of the administrative tools. We have a set of guides for teachers, a set of guides for students. You guys do not have to write user documentation. Just use ours and share that with your students and your teachers, and you guys will use it. So like for authentication information, very simple documentation. We walk you through exactly what it is, what the expected behavior is, how Canvas is supposed to work, and then we walk you through step by step on how to set that up. Okay, so this is pretty much how all of our user guides are set up to walk you through everything. So as you're looking at your user interface, you can have the guides open in another tab. When I first started using Canvas at my school, when we were going through this evaluation process, I would open Canvas in one tab and have the guides open in another because I was learning terminology and all that stuff. So anyway, on your authentication page, you have a drop-down, CAS, Facebook, GitHub, Google, Microsoft is there. So if you wanted to use Microsoft authentication, you're just plugging in basically your form fields for your Azure Active Directory. Okay. You can also do LDAP. And again, you're just plugging in your form fields.
How does enrollment work when you were in integration with Microsoft? What does it use from the user in the course to create that enrollment?
We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes.
Sorry.
So the authentication process, even for the so even for the non-technical people in the room, so what happens is your user attempts to log into Canvas. Canvas asks your Active Directory or whatever your authentication system, is this user a real person? If yes, can I log them into Canvas? Yes, and then the person logs in. So the user is basically hitting the login screen, and before Canvas passes them through and lets them log in, it checks with your authentication provider, just verifies if that user is okay. That's all we're talking about here. So it really doesn't have anything to do with the courses. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It's just access into the system. Can I see Canvas? Canvas is 100% secure. There's some learning management systems out there where the login screen is the only secure screen. Everything else is insecure, which is HTTP with no pass. Everything in Canvas is HTTP pass. So you have to be a verified user, an authenticated user in order to see it. Any other questions about the authentication screen? The long and short of it is it's under your control. You choose which authentication method you want. You can have multiple methods if you want. So you can also allow Google if you want. If you want to have a discovery screen, some schools will have different constituents. So they might actually have what we call a discovery page. Right, so the user will try to log in and it will check here first. Does this user exist in Canvas? No. Well, do they exist here? No. Well, do they exist here? Yeah. Okay, let them through. So you can actually have multiple authentication methods, and it'll just go in whatever order you number them. It will just keep going through until it finds a key, and if it's not available, then the user can't log in. So there are multiple ways. Or you can have a discovery page where you can direct students and say, if you're a student, log in here. If you're not a student, log in here. So we try to accommodate all the different anomalies that institutions have with matriculated students, non-matriculated students, different modes of authentication for different programs, right? So it's pretty customizable as far as what we're doing. So sys importing, again, this is only for your super admins, your real technical admins. This is not something that the help desk staff or anything like that would do. So your sys imports, no matter what student information system you're using, it's a 3-step process. You query your student information system colleague. Who are the users that need access? What are the courses that are running this semester? And who needs to be enrolled in what course? And how do they need to be enrolled? So you're querying your student information system to get that data. Then you transform the data in a way that Canvas can consume it. So you have to speak Canvas's language. And then you push or pull that data into Canvas. So it's always a 3-step process, no matter what your student information system is. And it's that transform piece. So it's query, transform, push or pull. It's that transform piece that's the most important for Canvas. So what we provide you with is directions for how to transform that data. And we have probably, I don't know, we could probably give you 18 referrals if you need that many to schools that are using Colleague who do this every day. This is not unusual to us. There's no flags on the field. It's business as usual as far as we're concerned to do this with Colleague. So you do your query, and then you have to format those files. It's just a CSV File Exchange, that's all it is. We give you all the technical information like UTF-8, the date and timestamp, how to handle foreign characters, spaces, commas, stuff like that. We'll make this text a little bit bigger so you can enjoy all the copy here. So we talk about diffing mode, batch mode, all that kind of stuff. You can read through that. And then we get into the actual formats. So your typical provisioning process is going to include your users, your courses, and your enrollments, right? Pretty basic stuff. You'll have some other stuff like terms, spring, summer, fall, summer A, summer B. You'll have accounts, your sub-account hierarchy. So you'll have some other files, but at your core, like the simplest scenarios, users, courses, and enrollments. So this is your user CSV. It says user CSV at the top. And notice the required field column here. So we tell you exactly which fields are required. You can ignore anything else. Okay, question? So the question is, or the inquiry is that currently you're using the ILP Connector with Illusion. ILP, Intelligent Learning Platform, is a proprietary version of the LAS 2.0 standard, which is an industry standard. Canvas is certified in LAS 2.0 because Illusion has proprietarized that with ILP. We also had to meet that standard, which we have. And we have schools that are right now beta testing that for us. So we worked on, we had to go LAS 2.0 certified first, then build to the ILP connector, which we did last fall. Now we're testing it and it should be ready to go this summer. So for your timeline, you should be able to use the ILP connector. And there haven't been any issues. Where are we? End of February, they've been doing it since Jan. So yeah, I haven't heard of any problems with the ILP process. So the workflow with ILP, or if you're using the Canvas API, either way, is you have your sys, and you do your export, you do your transform, and then you do your push into the LMS. And it's this transform piece that we're talking about. It's just using the ILP format for it. That's all, using the ILP connector for the push. So this is the ILP part. Prior to ILP, or for schools that are using Illusion without the ILP, they do this through the Canvas API. So either way, it's going to work either way.
What is the best practice, or from your experience, is the ILP necessary?
Oh, you've taken me into the danger zone. Okay, let me put on my professional hat.
And can you repeat the question?
As I process the answer, I know I want to frame this. So the question is, what is the best practice, to do the ILP or do the API? The API is an open framework. It's an open standard. It allows it's application programming interface. It allows two pieces of technology to talk to each other and pass data back and forth. That's what API is. It's not proprietary. Anybody can build to it. That's kind of where our heart is in openness. Elution is a big player in the market, and we respect what they do. We certainly wouldn't want to build an SIS. It's a complicated business, and they do it very well. They've been doing it for years. For whatever reason, they decided to do the ILP provisioning system and the portals and everything else they do, rather than do an open basis, and that's fine. You're probably paying for ILP, so you should use it, and you can use it, and that's fine. They're both going to work. The end result's going to be the same. It's just, you know, you're building to this other framework that they created, which is fine. It's just playing by their rule book, I guess you could say, which is fine.
From your experience with the schools that have the ILP and the other ones that doesn't, which one is best off?
That's a fair question. Which one is best based on our experience? Well, we've been supporting Elution colleague schools using API. We've been supporting them for about 5.5 years. We're just starting to support those using ILP now. We're just testing that right now. And it's going well. It's going well. I haven't heard of any flags on the field for that. It seems to be going well. So, and it's not just Elution. Like, I'm not trying to throw Elution under the bus. PeopleSoft did the same thing with their SAIP connector. They did the same thing. It's LAS2 on the back end, but they made it their own. They put their own brand on it. So, you know, it's a. Do you have to write your own code to use the API? No, because there are other schools that have already done it. So you just be like, hey, Becker College in Massachusetts, or hey, Bucks County College, or hey, McHenry College in Ohio, talk to Ray. Hey, Ray, I'll introduce you. What are you doing? Either way you're going to. With Elution, they've already done it for you, right? Using the ILP. The API is open and it's accessible, but you do have the ability, if you're a Python shop, doing Python, if you're a Microsoft shop, you know, doing PowerShell. You have that flexibility using the API. Yeah.
So to sum up, if we want to use the API, we have to use the top five.
Correct.
And we have to come up with a PowerShell script or code we build our own application that we'll talk about.
That's correct.
And it's not something that you would provide us.
For the API, we would provide you as much support, get you as far down the road as we possibly can. We don't want this to be a painful process to you. We want at the end of the implementation, we want you to say, man, that was easy. Or I'm so glad we did this now, we didn't wait. That's what we want you to feel. And we're gonna do everything we can to get you there. And when I say we can introduce you to 18 different schools that are doing this every day, we certainly can. And our Canvas community, because everyone is using the same version of Canvas, and it's all hosted with us, when you have those conversations with other schools, it's very easy to share ideas and share resources because you're all on the same version. You're not, you know, you're not middle 1, middle 2, middle 3. Everyone's on Canvas now. It's just easier. So like, I just matched up a couple of schools on the East Coast. Becker College, I said specifically because I just did this. I said, hey, go talk to Becker. And Becker's like, here you go, here's all our scripts. And you just change your parameters and your access token and you're up and running. Our schools are phenomenal with sharing resources. They really are. And there's a lot of stuff that you can discover on your own, on GitHub and in our user community as well. People are very open and they share a lot of resources. From a former campus technology perspective, it's so refreshing to see educational technology go that way and have that community really build, because it helps everybody move faster. You know, that hockey stick of adoption, you know, like it's not a slope, it's a vertical. Everyone's just iterating so much faster now, and that's because of sharing.
And to your point, we do have, if you want to go the way where we kind of take on the responsibility of building, there are levels of implementation and services we can provide that do that. Typically, like Carrie said, schools use the community and use it fine and get up and running very, very quickly. Dunwoody, again, was another new institution who did that. So those are options if you want. Building on your own, also options if you want. A lot of schools find the APIs to be a little bit more customizable and flexible for their needs. I think that's where the benefit of the APIs come into play rather than using ILP. Because you can do some pretty unique things. For instance, with API scripting, we have schools who will hit a button at the beginning of their semester. They create courses, they create all of their enrollments, and then they push all of their content. So they actually do all the course copy via API scripts and then teachers are up and running already with their content, right? So there are some really good flexibilities there that the API scripts actually do open up there, so that you may find more beneficial than ILP.
Yeah, and when you go through the implementation with Canvas, Sean talked about your CSM, your Customer Success Manager, and your implementation consultant. We do a lot of discovery calls with you initially. What are you doing now so that we can understand kind of what's the standard right now? What are your aspirations? What would you like to change, or how would you like to see things run or function? We look at efficiencies, everything that we know from working with all the schools that we've implemented in the past. We're like, oh, so-and-so did it this way, and when they did it that way, they got X benefit, right? So we'll help you discover efficiencies that can be made, because you want this change to be really worth it as much as possible, right? If you've been doing something because the technology was holding you hostage to that methodology, if there's room to change that and make it more efficient, let's take advantage of it. So we'll do a lot of discovery calls to find out what absolutely needs to happen to maintain business as usual. Where can we make efficiencies? Where can we do improvements? And then what are your aspirational goals? Where would you like to see the LMS and the Cisco, or just the LMS? So we'll work through all that with you, and then we'll prioritize accordingly.
So I have
Yeah.
a question. Outside this, is it possible?
Of course.
How about that can use SQL, MySQL? How deep the access to it? Can you manipulate the data, or the access to it, or just reporting?
So the question is about how do you do reporting with Canvas, and we have a couple of different ways. So this doesn't have to be the only conversation. You know, depending on what the project lead team lead wants to do, we can always have additional conversations.
Typically, we only have like 3 minutes left.
Okay. So as an admin, you have access to our general reports tool, which gives you a relatively small, considering how many API endpoints there are, but a pretty robust list of general reports. All of these reports are built off the API. So you can always customize and build your own reports. But to give you a sample of what you can get out, so for example, this is a pretty popular one, the outcome results. It's just a flat file of data. So you'll see the student's name, there's a Canvas ID for the student, and then the SIS ID for the student. So if you need to map that back to SIS data, you can do that. Every activity, an assignment, a quiz has a unique identifier as well. And then like dates and timestamps, grades, courses, course IDs. So you get a flat file with all this data in it, and then you analyze it in SQL or whatever else you want to analyze it with. All of this can be extracted using the Canvas API. The API is on the same page as your SIS data. It's just api.instructure.com. It's not secret. It's open to the public. You can view it. So what you would do is you would generate, so you as the admin would generate an authentication token so that you can pull reports, and you can do that through PowerShell or through Perl. And then you just have that API drop that data wherever you want it to go, a local database, and you do whatever you want with it. So that's pulling data from your production instance or your test or your beta instance using the API, which you can do at any time. But we also have, for larger institutional data analysis and reporting, we give you Canvas data, which is a daily data dump of hundreds of thousands of line items of, it's in a fact and div dimension. So you can look at discussion posts, student access, quizzes, quiz results. It's literally millions of data points in an ODBC file. So you just pull that, and there's an API for it, so you can have it automatically dump into your local database.
So that's daily for that day, or daily for all time?
It runs 24 to 36 hours every data dump. It's a lot of data to process, so we tell you it's going to be refreshed every 24 to 36 hours, and we're doing this on a global scale. So you'll start to see the pattern as you start seeing the downloads come in. But it's just a general interface. It comes free. It comes standard. We don't charge you anything extra. We don't hold your data hostage. You have access to data, one, through the API query in real time, anytime you want, or use that daily data dump for the larger, high-level institutional analysis needs. It's pretty complex. We see people using things like Tableau and Cognos to look at that data. So it's a lot.
Power BI for
Power
Microsoft
BI.
schools.
And again, the community has been doing a lot of work in that area, so there are resources in other schools to talk to and learn from.
And the APIs has access to all of that.
The APIs, yeah, there's pretty much an API endpoint for everything. And in our release notes, when we add in new APIs there, or update them or change them, they're included in release notes. So if we're, like, for the new quizzing tool, we had to build a new set of APIs for that. You know, so we're always working on our API, improving it, and adding more things. And it's available to you in your sandbox. So put it, put it to the full test. When you have access to it, generate that access token and start queries and yeah, put it through its paces, absolutely.
Sometimes that and other sessions.
Thank you for coming.
What was that?
Do you have other sessions after that?
Yep, it's the same as the other ones, so up until 2.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about the technical backend? Can I touch on roles and permissions for just a minute? So we talked earlier, I mentioned briefly earlier that there are different types of admins that come into play. So by default, you get your student, TA, teacher, designer roles. Okay, so these are course level roles. This is how people are enrolled into courses. And then you have account level roles. So this is your system level admins. The add role button is where you might add like the help desk technician role, and then you pick and choose what they are allowed to do, right? So you get really granular, and it's just a toggle switch to enable or disable a permission. That's all, pretty simple. And then for course level roles, same thing, it's just enabling or disabling any of these permissions. An exercise might be to open up Moodle and look at rules and permissions, and open up Canvas and compare, just to learn, just to kind of get a sense of what's in there. You can also create custom course roles. So you might have a guest lecturer or a variation of a TA role or a librarian role, like for an embedded librarian program. So you can create a custom role, base it off an existing role, and then do further modification of the roles and permissions just by enabling or disabling permissions. So you have control over how users have access to content and tools in the course, and then who has access and what they have access to as an admin. So like the registrar might have a variation of an admin role. Maybe they can't change courses or add content, but they can run reports, right? So, does that all make sense about role and permissions? I just wanted to touch on that. Okay. Cool. What's next, Sean?
Student success session, 30 minutes.